thank you everybody for joining us today for the for Making Your Move, which is the real estate seminar, and we're really happy to have Kevin Breitner and Alessandra DiStefano with us, right? And listen, it's amazing because today I just read an article that came out yesterday in the Toronto Star that says that house prices have plummeted in some areas, 30%. Skugog, they're saying on average it's down 44%. And so people are probably wondering what's going on. Interest rates are going up. There was a new rule that came in about foreign investment that came into effect at the beginning of the year. So what does the future hold for real estate? And we just don't know. But before we get into that, and I know that Kevin and Alessandra are just chomping at the bit to get going. Before we get into that, I'd like to just talk about tomorrow. Tomorrow, of course, Tech Talk. I've got Christopher Cavalieri from Lightboards. He's going to be doing a presentation on Tech Talk with us. Very, very interesting if you're looking to do live professional presentations. And then, of course, Monday we have Catherine Davies. Well, Catherine's not going to be here, so I'll be doing morning coffee, and that will be quite exciting. So those are the two announcements. And with that, we're just going to have Kevin and Alessandra. I'll start with Alessandra. Just introduce yourself and exactly what you do in the company that you're with.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for attending. My name is Alessandra. I'm a mortgage agent based out of Hamilton, and I'm with the brokerage Real Mortgage Associates. What I do is I help people with their mortgage financing. So whether you're moving, refinancing, anything like that, that's how I come into play with this conversation. We're very excited to have you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, Kevin.
My name's Kevin Breitner. I'm broker of the Cressy team with Remax Real Estate Center. We have 17 offices on the west side of the GTA, so we cover a nice little area here. And Cressy is an acronym for Complete Real Estate Solutions Investments, and it's all about being your complete solution. So we have the team in place to make sure that you are always going to be looked after from beginning to end throughout the transaction. And we even have a property management company as well if you're thinking about investing. That way it can truly be a passive investment. We take care of all the day-to-day, and you can just put your money to work for you like you would in the stock market. Also happy to be here. Thanks for joining us.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Kevin, I'm going to just start with you. What is happening here with the real estate market? People that bought their homes over the past 2 years, they paid a premium. I heard stories where real estate agents didn't even have to go and show the home. They just basically sold the home. They wouldn't even go inside. They'd take a picture from in their car of the outside of the house. And that was it. And that was enough to sell it. And people paid a premium price. What would you say to those folks right now? And is this the time to jump into the market with the interest rates the way they are, or should people wait?
So I'll answer the first question or the second question first. Is it time to jump in the market? That depends on your specific situation. But at the end of the day, real estate is a long-term play, whether it's an investment or ownership. It's better to pay your own mortgage than somebody else's in the form of rent. So yes, even though interest rates are high right now, they say high. My first mortgage was 6.25. So it is what it is. It's really about affordability, and you live with the payment. Can you get out of this and into this? And again, everybody's situation is different, but yes, if you can get into the market right now and stop paying rent, it's time to do so. And as an investor, if you're able to buy something right now, the old adage is buy low and sell high, right? Well, right now the prices are very low in comparison. We've pretty much gone back to what they were almost a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago. So there is that you are going to regain, or as an investor buying now, you won't be regaining it. You'll be catching it on the way up. But somebody that bought a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, they will regain it again. It isn't lost. Value only matters when you're buying or selling, right? Or refinancing. Buying, selling, and refinancing is the only time value matters. Whether it's an investment or whether it's your home. Let's say you bought a house for $800,000 2 years ago, and now you're going to tell me it's only worth $650,000, but your mortgage hasn't changed, your life hasn't changed. What does it matter, right? Because if you're in a fixed rate from 2 years ago, it's still the same carrying through. It would only matter if you're in a variable, and then that is what it is. But over time, variable is going to win out, they say anyways, historically. So you just got to take your lumps every once in a while with that one. But
okay.
Yeah. I'll stop there for now.
Well, okay, Alessandra, what are you seeing out there? People coming to you for mortgages. Are you seeing a lot of fear going into the market?
So we're seeing a few things. So what we're seeing is people with that initial panic of, is my house even still worth this? But like Kevin said, you have to think long term. If you're thinking of your property in terms of 1 or 2 years, then you have a very different plan. So like Kevin said, you've got different ways that you can invest in it. So flippers versus people who own or occupy their home, two very different strategies, right? So depending on which camp you're in, whether you're in it for a short-term or long-term investment, or it's for you to live in, it's going to be a different approach. So even when it comes to like interest rates, like Kevin said, everybody's complaining that the interest rates are high, but you kind of have to take out anywhere between 2020 and halfway through 2022 when we talk about interest rates, because back in 2019, pre-pandemic, the rates were around 4%. So when you look at it that way, and we look at a normal course of a year in real estate, it's not that far off in terms of where we were pre-pandemic, because obviously during the pandemic, the government did what they felt was right to stimulate the economy, to keep things going. And they said, okay, we're just going to tank the interest rates and hope that stimulates other things, right? But again, you have to remember that we got spoiled during the pandemic. So those low interest rates, we will probably never see again. I would be surprised to see rates that low ever again.
I was saying it was free money for a long time. That was free money. It was crazy that they were giving away something. I have a client who locked in below 2% for 5 years at like 1.68 or something like that. Ridiculous. That's free money. That never should have happened. Like Alessandra just said, in a normal market, right, which hasn't been the last couple of years, it's like everybody thought that the world was going to end, or that there was never going to be a new house built. But here we are. It's always supply and demand that has people going through things.
Okay, so for the folks that are here, if you have any questions, just raise your hand, and you can definitely butt in at any time. It's more of a discussion, not a lecture. But I'm always curious, right? Because when back in the good old days, back in the 70s or so, buying a house was something that was attainable for most people, because they could pretty much buy a house for under 100,000. And they were, it was like 4 times earnings, right? That you'd be able to put into a property. But today you're finding that, finding a decent, let's say 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom home is more like $1 million in Toronto, right? So, and earnings are on average 65,000, right? So what do you say to somebody who's looking to get into the market? I mean, strategically speaking, right? I'm just gonna leave it at that, and then I'll ask the next question. Go ahead, Kevin.
So again, it depends on this individual specific situation. You know what I mean? Just because you have to live in Toronto doesn't mean you need to own real estate in Toronto. You can own real estate outside and have somebody else rent that place from you while you're renting something else. I have a client that lives down in Liberty Village, and a few years ago, he bought 2 properties in Hamilton that helped supplement his rent there. Properties have all gone up in value, but he couldn't afford in Liberty Village then. He still can't afford in Liberty Village, but because of his job, he needs to stay there. But he invested in real estate elsewhere. Some people don't need to live in Toronto to work in Toronto. They can remote work. Everybody's situation is different, and we have to figure out what's going to make sense to them and what they want to do. But real estate is the best investment in the world. Whether, again, it's your roof or somebody else's roof, right? Everybody needs a roof over their head. And then you started us off. Canada is such a new country. Okay, we are not even we are a very new country. Things are growing here very fast because we are a place that everybody wants to come to. Immigration this year is going to be at an all-time high. It's almost doubling from what we let in pre-pandemic. So what's going to happen there? That creates movement, right? They're going to need a roof. So they're going to not be able to buy because they're not a landed resident yet. They can't get a mortgage unless they have that much money. They're buying in cash when they come, which does happen. But some of them are going to be, most of them will be renters, which causes renters to move around, which causes some renters to buy, which is going to create action, right? This is what we're going through right now isn't going to last very long. I don't see it happening because of 3 reasons. What I just mentioned about immigration. Unemployment is at an all-time low, right? We have people making money. And when you're saying people can't afford it, I helped a 29-year-old kid that had $250,000 saved in his bank account from construction work from when he was 21 to 29. So again, different people do different things. When I was 29, that's when we bought our first house. But I was at an event the other day with Shannon, and Sheila was there as well. And there was a 19-year-old kid in that room on a Saturday afternoon. I thought that was amazing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, people are doing way different things today to better their lives than I would have been doing when I was 19. There's no way I would have been there on a Saturday afternoon. I would have been out on a hill or something like that, or rank something in the winter time. Anyways, older countries, London, if you want to go there, or even New York, international cities like that, their real estate is still much higher than ours. They have generational mortgages in London. So you have like a grandmother, a mother, and a son all on the same mortgage. They have 50-year amortizations. So I don't know where we go in the future. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know one thing for sure is that everybody needs a roof over their head. So you're always going to have a little dip like this, because it was insane what happened the last few years. Like, that wasn't normal at all. The constant rise of pricing, the craziness of buyers paying hundreds of thousands of dollars over asking. Why? What was so special about that house than the one down the road? You know, I know of a house in Brampton that sold in November. Okay, they closed on it. They bought it in November. They closed on it January 16th. It sold January 18th for $400,000 more. What happened in that amount of time? You couldn't renovate it, right? Because the old owner had just left in 2 days. So it wasn't a flip. It was straight 3 months time, almost $500,000 in appreciation. Like that's insane. And the agent that's working with that person, that's advising them, you know, again, depending on their specific situation, if they're buying that amazing home that's just down the street from their mother and they're about to have twins, maybe now the value there is a little bit higher because you're going to have all that kind of help later. But to just get into your first house, why do you have to buy a big detached 4-bedroom house if you're a young couple? Just because you can afford it. Now they're struggling, right? Because of all this that's gone on. I know a few people that push themselves to their limit and they don't even have a kid yet. So a 3-bedroom townhouse would be more than enough size in a 4-bedroom semi or detached or whatever, right?
Okay, Veronica, don't forget your question. Okay, don't forget your question. I do want to ask something about Alessandra. Is it a mind shift that people have to have when it comes to property? Because, like, I remember years ago when we bought our house in Brantford, the real estate agent said, "Don't fall in love." It's an asset. You have to, you can love the house, but don't fall in, don't go crazy paying $400,000 more over asking. You got to keep things in perspective. But you're on the front lines. You see the disappointment, you see the hope, you see the anticipation. What are you seeing?
So in terms of mindsets, when I meet with someone who is a first-time home buyer, I always like to ask them, what is your expectation? Because sometimes you have a couple or an individual who says, I just know I need to get into the market. And that's one camp. And then you have camp number 2 who goes, oh, well, this is my wish list. And it sounds a lot like their parents' house. And I go, okay, let's take a step back. Like, is that where you need to start though? Because I'm sure if you asked your parents, that's not necessarily the house that they started in. And I think it's hard because we have a lot of people in our society who feel that they, a sense of entitlement where they deserve the best right away. They've got many accomplishments, yes, but when it comes to real estate, you really do. They call it the ladder for a reason. Like, you have to take those stepping stones. You can't just automatically move into the $1 million home. Like, yeah, it's nice to be close to your parents, but if your parents live in Ancaster, maybe that's not the best place to start. Or maybe starting with a detached home in Ancaster is not necessarily the best place to start. Maybe it's a condo or a townhouse, like Kevin said, right? But I think the other shift that we're really starting to see, especially with people who are, like, I meet with people who may not be buying for a number of years. So maybe they're starting off, how do I save up for a down payment? How do I get myself ready? And it could be a younger couple who is just engaged and they're working on paying down student loans because you can't graduate without a student loan, basically. And I think the average debt load when people graduate is anywhere between $40,000 and $60,000. And that's not easy to pay down. And Southern Ontario is not the most transit friendly place. So you have to have a car if you're going to be driving around. So now you've got a car loan, right? So they almost take this a lot of clients that I'm finding in the younger generation, they're taking a work smarter, not harder approach too, which I think is going to be a really interesting shift as well to see in the coming years. So like they may have a full-time job, but then they also have all these little side hustles that maybe we can't use for qualification purposes, but we can use it for budgeting purposes in terms of advice on how do we pay this down faster? How do we get you ready to buy the home? Is that something we do want you to be claiming on your taxes so that we can increase your income? So there's a lot of different conversations that stem from that.
Interesting. Okay, I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Go ahead, Veronica.
So my boyfriend and I have been talking for the last year or two about buying a house. We currently rent a condo in Stony Creek, and I have a full-time job now. He is just starting a new full-time job. So our options are going to increase, obviously, in the coming months, which is great. Realistically speaking, what kind of like tuck it in a shoebox under the bed kind of money are we talking if we wanted to just not have to take so large of a mortgage? Like, is there a kind of advice on what's a good starting point of what you should be tucking away per month?
This is definitely an Alessandra question, but before she goes, I'm going to say you live with the payment, not the mortgage. So a lot of people think that they're borrowing $400,000 and they don't want to borrow that. Think about what your monthly payment's going to be. The whole world runs on credit, and we need to borrow some money to be able to get it. And the house will appreciate over time. So don't let that big number you're borrowing scare you. Think about the payment that you're paying every month, like you're paying rent right now. If I'm paying rent and it's $2,500 and now my mortgage is going to be $3,000, hey, I have ownership for $500 more a month. That's something you want to be thinking about versus, oh my God, I'm borrowing X amount of money.
Pretty much the mindset we both have, because neither of us enjoys renting. It was a necessary evil for the time. Yeah. But now we're going to have more options in the next couple months. So we've been talking more and more seriously. And now I know we're probably going to have to move, and our lease is up this August. So.
So that's when you're going to want to think to time that up for them, because you're going to have to give them 60 days notice. So you might want to start thinking about getting pre-approved sometime in the early summer so you can start hunting, and then you can line something up for right around that time. Because another thing that a lot of renters do when they're moving into their first home is they have that last month that they've already prepaid for, where part of that might be their new mortgage starting. So they're into that, so they have a couple of weeks to move and not stressing out that they got to be out on one day and in on another day, like back to back. But Alessandra, you should answer her question, I guess.
That's okay. You did a really good job, Kevin, actually. So what I normally say to people, so we get a lot of people who are calling in and saying, hey, I'm thinking that we might be buying a house in the next year or two. The minute you start thinking about it is actually when you should start getting your ducks in a row, because you want to be able to know what you're up against now versus what you may be up against later. So someone like me would be able to tell you, hey, there's actually a rule change coming, and it's coming into effect this month. And this is how it's going to impact you now versus how it will impact your qualification later. Over the last couple of years, they made a lot of changes to down payment structures. So when clients were buying houses over $500,000, for example, the minimum down payment changed. And for some people, that was not a big deal. But for others, they had to figure out, okay, how do we save up that extra money if we haven't bought by that time? And like Kevin said, you don't want to think of the mortgage as a whole. So you want to be able to think about, can I carry this house for the term of this mortgage? Because if you lock it in for, say, 3 years, then you know for the next 3 years, that payment is not going to change. Your property taxes will change. And there's a lot of budgetary questions that come from that. So, if your property taxes change and they increase by X amount per year, are you still going to be okay? And likewise, the price of gas just went up, right? So you say, okay, well, this is my equal billing now. What do I think it might be if it goes up again? So
what buffer is there though? Because if you're thinking, okay, what can I afford? Like, what can I carry per month? And I love what Kevin said about, it's just an extra $500 a month for ownership. That's great at the current interest rates. But if something happens where the interest rates go up by, 3 points, right, in a short period of time, then it's not. Then those numbers are completely out of whack. So what buffer do you leave for yourself, just in case?
It would only change if you had a variable. If you have a fixed rate mortgage for 3 years, it's fixed. right? That payment is there no matter what. And traditionally in real estate, they've said this, that it's always, this is the first time it's higher than a fixed rate on the 5-year. It's always been lower, and traditionally you do way better in a variable. But I saw this the other day, 65% of mortgages across Canada are a 5-year fixed rate, right? The banks want you in a 5-year fixed rate because 5 years is a long time, right? Most people move out of their first house between 4 and 7 years. So if you're at the beginning stage of that, right, you're going before your mortgage is even ready, and now you're paying a penalty, right? The best thing to do, especially when rates are higher, is to have a shorter term if you want that fixed rate, if you're not wanting the flexibility or the fluctuation, I should say, of the variable, right? You can lock it in and just do it again, but don't do it for 5 years. That's a long time. Life changing.
So one last question, just real quick here. Things have changed over the past little while. Rents have gone up, right? I was shocked, sticker shock, when my neighbor who was moving out was saying that they were moving to Woodstock because they could get the same apartment for cheaper. And I was curious. I said, how much? What are you paying for your 2-bedroom apartment? And he said that $2,100 for a 2-bedroom apartment, which to me sounds expensive, anyway, for a 2-bedroom apartment. And now he just recently moved in, so we've been here for a while longer, so we don't pay anywhere near that. But if you're paying $2,100, I remember when I owned my house, that's more than my mortgage was, right? And that was just a few years ago. So how much does $2,000 get somebody? And let's say that the average rent that people are paying here is around $2,000, or around $2,000, I'd say. What kind of buying power is that? I don't know if you're able to calculate that.
So that's actually a little bit difficult to answer for a number of reasons, because it's going to depend on what the purchase price is, what your down payment is, what the interest rate of the mortgage is, and how long you're amortizing that mortgage. So we have to remember that a big component of what you pay, like the interest rate, yes, we always want a low interest rate, because what the interest rate does is it not only affects the payment, but it also affects how much of your payment goes towards your principal versus your interest. And that's true for variable or fixed, right? But the amortization is the life itself of the loan. So most people will opt for 25 or 30 years, depending on what they do, especially with higher interest rates. So depending on how all of that is set up will dictate what the payment is. So somebody who has a larger down payment is going to be very different than someone who has, say, a minimal down payment.
Okay.
So in terms of $2,000 a month, it's going to depend on all those different factors fitting together.
Okay. I always think that mortgages is 25 years, but I guess that's not true anymore. Right?
It depends on the down payment, and it depends on what someone's comfort level is. So even if you have a higher down payment, even though you can use 30 years, it doesn't always make sense to do that. So some people do opt for 25, 20, or even less years, depending on the situation, because maybe they're selling their house and they're downsizing. So they have a much larger down payment and they only need, say, 200,000. So you can be quite aggressive with that if you have that much flexibility. But for somebody who's just getting into the market for the first time, they're not likely to have a larger down payment. So they may need more time to pay that back, and they can't be as aggressive in the beginning, especially depending on what kind of house they buy. So somebody who's buying a house that, is a bit of a fixer-upper, they might need that extra flexibility in their budget to fix up rooms as they live there.
So do you factor rent into that calculation? I'm going to buy a house. It has the potential for a basement apartment. I want to be able to rent that out. Does that get factored in?
Yeah, it does. So we can't always use the whole. It depends on the lender. Some lenders will take more of a percentage than others, but lenders like to be on the cautious side. So they'll say, okay, well, we want to use some of the rental income, not all of it, in case there's a vacancy. We know the insurance cost is going to be higher because now you have a rental policy on there, that sort of thing. And it depends on if you have 2 meters, for example. So if you have 2 meters, is the client paying for all the house heat, or is the tenant paying for some of the heat?
Are you seeing a lot of that, Kevin? Because I know that recently we both know someone who has a house. They've turned their basement into a basement apartment. And are you seeing now that there's more inventory out there that has an income suite in it?
Yeah, so it all comes back to affordability again, right? It is allowing people to afford that bigger home if they're not going to use the basement, but they want the backyard, or Again, rentability, right? That gives more inventory out there for people to rent. All the municipalities, thanks to Mr. Ford, have now been given permission to do so with the tiny houses or whatever. Now, the municipality still has to make their rules, even though he said everybody can do it. You still have to get permission from your local municipality to be able to do what you want to do. You can't just say Doug said so, so now we can do whatever. And every city does have their rules that you have to abide by. But no, it makes a lot of sense. Even like my mom and my sister are talking about doing it, right? One living up and one living down so that they're close by, but they have their own separate living. And my mom is still on one floor, right? If they do a bungalow. There's lots of reasons why people are doing shared accommodations. I have a client that rents out her basement, but they share a kitchen just to help with affordability. So it's not even a full basement rental. It's someone that she's okay with living there with, and they share a kitchen, obviously, but it gives her $700 a month towards her mortgage.
Amazing.
Right? Like it allows her to, whether it's lifestyle or whatever she wants to do with that extra money, it's there for her now. And she doesn't need that home space, right? Like she goes down to her basement to do laundry. So they share laundry and that's it.
Okay, cool. Neil, go ahead.
Yeah, the term carrying cost, I heard mentioned a couple of times. This question is for the experts. Okay, let's assume that someone buys a house, but they're either not interested in having a rental unit in it, or they can't because of the way it's built, right? So how do you compare the carrying cost of a house that you buy versus, say, the cost of renting over the same period of time? Let me just sort of explain that a little bit more. There are certain carrying costs that owning a home will have versus renting. Okay, my house, I'm responsible for everything in my house. The water heater, the roof, the furnace, the upkeep of the house, the ground, everything. I pay for that. Whereas in a rental situation, you're not necessarily paying for all of those things. Yes, you're paying for it through your rent, and maybe you're paying for your own hydro. But typically, this is what I'm interested in. How do you compare how do you do that? What is where do you go to get that information, or how do you counsel your clients in that way? Because maybe for some people, buying a home is not feasible. It's not financially feasible because it's not just the mortgage we're talking about.
So most leases that we have in place, over 90% of them are utilities extra. Very few of our leases are all inclusive, and if they are, it's because they're in a multi-building that we don't have separately monitored, so we really can't. So we build it into their rent, but they all still pay their own Rogers bill, or whatever. Most electricity is all still separate, like the one I'm thinking about, but they have the rest of their utilities on themselves, are included. Sorry. So when you're thinking about what's going to be carrying with electricity and what people use, it's all different per household and what's going on. With regards to what it's going to be in a difference over time, there's a reason as investors, we buy rental properties. I can assure you that you come out way better as an owner than a tenant. One of my best friends, we talked about this all the time. He can afford to buy a house. He does not want to buy a house. He thinks that he's doing better playing with his money in other ways. And then when I said, if you had bought a house in 2017, when this conversation you and I started, have you done that well in stocks? And then he throws back at me that what has happened lately. And I said, have you still done that good? So even with the drop right now, people that own houses are still doing way better than people that don't. It is the best investment in the world because you only need 20% down, right? So you're leveraging the other 80% from somebody else, and a third party is paying down that entire thing for you. Simply put, again, if you're renting because you need to rent and you cannot afford to buy a house, then that's a different situation. If you're living somewhere where you need to rent, you can buy real estate elsewhere where it's more affordable. But owning real estate is definitely the best asset you can have. I know I'm biased for sure, but it's definitely 100% what I truly believe. Because again, everybody needs a roof. Everybody.
Well, on that, I'm going to just say this. I know that when you have a house, that there are a lot more options available to you. Alessandra can probably speak to this too. Is that when if say something terrible happens in the future, you have the ability to get
Let's pull the equity out.
right, pull equity out without and banks tend to go, oh, you have a house and it has equity. The answer is yes, right? So whereas if you're renting, you don't have that ability. So what are you talking about? Some of the tools that are available.
Before I get into that, I do have a few other comments for Neil's question there. So I'm going to preface this with, from what I've seen, not everybody is meant to buy a house. And I know that may sound weird. My job is to get people qualified into homes. But there are times where when I see a client's financials and I see what's happening, sometimes there's a conversation of, I see that you would like to buy a house, but let's talk about what needs to happen in order to get you ready. So maybe now is not the right time, but here are the steps that you can take, because as mentioned, there's different costs associated with renting than there is owning. And while there's a lot of great calculators that I always encourage clients to use, there's things that you can estimate for the cost of your internet, for the cost of your electricity. In terms of renting water heaters, like you can usually find that information on the MLS listing. It'll usually say hot water heater rental, and depending on who the company is, it's pretty easy to find out what that cost is. However, with clients who are buying houses who are going from renting, I don't always encourage people to put all of their down payment. So I try and tell clients, you don't know your house until you have lived there in every single season. Because your gas cost, if you're not doing equal billing in the summer, is going to be very different than what it is in the wintertime. They're not going to be the same cost. Like your electric bill, if you're running that furnace all the time and you don't have it on a schedule and you're just keeping the house at say 25, 26, that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt, right? So I try and encourage people to say, things are going to break. Like even for my husband and I, when we bought our first house, we planned on a lot of things happening, but we did not plan for the washing machine to break down. But thankfully we had the money aside. And we didn't have to tap into credit after. So there's a lot of things that happen on this side that we go, okay, let's make sure you have a cushion, because if something happens, and it doesn't even have to be the house, your car can break down at the worst of times.
Oh.
It's not just the house. So we try and keep into account that other things will happen. And it also depends on, when was the last time the house you bought was reassessed for property taxes, because that happens every so many years. So if the company that does that, MPAC, if they decide this is the year that you're getting reassessed, if they increase that value with the municipality, that means your taxes are going up too. So there's a lot of things that you just can't account for upfront, but we do our best to make sure that the client has a cushion and something to fall back on that's not credit.
All right. So here's a question for Kevin. Kevin, what's the best investment? Is it as far as resale is concerned, is it a condo, a townhouse, or is it a detached home?
Okay. So when we're thinking about simplicity to rent out, longevity for appreciation or something like that, if I was going to say what I think would be the best thing, again, size matters. Like, I don't know, type of property isn't going to matter for the numbers really, right? Your townhouse is going to be a little bit less maintenance, easier rentable because it's going to be a little bit cheaper. Your detached house will appreciate at a higher, not a higher percentage, but it will go up a little bit more than your townhouse theoretically. Probably, can't guarantee the future, but it should anyways. But it's going to have a little bit more work to it. You might be able to rent it out for more money, cash flow a little bit better that way. There's a lot of investors right now that aren't even cash flowing. They're just making sure that their money is better there than it is elsewhere. With the rates that went up, I had a client who was calling me about, what do I do? Do I sell? Now it's costing me $200 a month for this guy to live in my house. But he is a young guy under 30 living at home. And I said, what else do you need the money for other than beer fund? What do you spend money on? Right? Like, so it's just putting your money into a better savings account by letting your tenant stay there. Now he is moving out. We are getting now, he will be cash flowing again when the new tenant moves in. So all is good. It only lasted for about 6 months for him, but he was seriously nervous. And that was only, if you think about it, $200 over 6 months, it's only $1,200 on a property that's worth north of 800,000. That's a way better bank account to keep that $1,200 in than in his CIBC or RBC or whatever it was, and getting him a little bit in his savings account.
Well, how do you view condos? I didn't hear you mention anything about condos there.
So you're paying maintenance fees there. So I guess if I was going to help somebody buy an investment as a condo, the way to do that is pre-construction. Again, whether you're a first-time buyer getting into it that way or an investor, it's an easier way because you don't need a mortgage until the place comes ready. So you have somewhere between 3 and 5 years that you're just putting your cash money to work for you. Now, obviously, appreciation is speculation to what's actually going to happen throughout those few years. But all the ones we've sold, the investors have been very happy when it comes time to get a mortgage. So in that time, when they get occupancy, right? So you have 3 years or 4 years or whatever it is of build, where your money, your down payment is worth more, and then as because the purchase price is going to be more, right? Some investors will sell as an assignment at that time. I don't think that's the best way to do it. That is more like a parachute, where if something happens and we can't close, let's sell it as an assignment. But you'll still pay your HST that way, so you don't get that money back. Whereas if you close on it and rent it out for a year, we get your HST back, which could be $25,000 of regained money. I think that makes a lot more sense to go through with everything. But also during that occupancy period, you don't have a mortgage, but you have rights to occupy the unit. But the builder still owns it. So you're not paying a mortgage. You're paying your percentage of property taxes and maintenance fees for the building to the builder. So let's say it's $600 a month, but your tenant's already in there paying you $2,100 a month until you get your mortgage. That's then going to cost you $1,800 or $1,900. And then you start, but you're making bank for those first 6 to 9 months while you're waiting for occupancy because you're not paying the mortgage that way. So that is one way to invest in condos, but then I always say sell it when that tenant moves out. Go through 1 or 2 tenants. Don't stay in that condo for too long because the maintenance fees will go up. And don't buy anything with a pool or 24-hour concierge because they go up from day one because human labor constantly goes up and pools always need repairs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're buying a condo for an investment, buy something simple. You know, if you're in Grimsby, Veronica, we sold a few at Aqua Azul right along the lake there. The amenities there are a gym. The tenant loves it, right? She gets to walk along the lake and she goes to the gym. It's perfect for her. She doesn't need a pool or anything like that. That just would have cost my investor more money, right? So it's really about having a plan no matter what you're wanting to do and then doing it. But no, which one is the best investment? That's like asking me which city is the best to invest in. You know, every city now is very, very similar. We all have Home Depots, McDonald's, Wendy's. It's all the same. It's wherever your life is.
Townhouses, though, Kevin, they also have a fee as well, right?
Not always. Some are condo and some are freehold. So it just depends where you are. But then also condo fees in a townhouse are normally a lot smaller than in an apartment or in a condo building. On average, you're going to see fees in a condo anywhere in any city now north of $400 on average, I would say. Anywhere where townhouse complex, you're going to be somewhere still under 400, you know, 250 to 375, let's say, because all they're really doing there is worrying about snow removal, common areas, and roof and windows, right? They're all adjoined and stuff like that. So they're not worried about piping going through everything, elevators going through everything. Most don't have underground parking. Which is another big cost to maintain and to upkeep and everything like that. So again, like everything is different, and we have to analyze it to what we want to do and where we're at. But if you were to tell me, hey, all I can afford to get started investing is in a condo, I would say, let's do it. Let's get you started, right? Let's buy the right condo in the right price point that can get you started. Let's turn over 1 or 2 tenants, then maybe do a nice little fresh up renovation and sell it, then use that money to get you out of a condo into something else, right? It's we can grow our portfolios by adding more units, or we can diversify and go from whatever to whatever. It's a long-term play, right? As I said at the beginning, real estate is not a get rich quick, it's a get wealthy slow. And it's, you know, that's a famous what are they called, adages or stories or whatever, but my mentor told this to me, and I absolutely love it. He says the best time to plant a tree if you want shade is 20 years ago, and the next best time is today. right? And same thing is with real estate. The amount of times I have, so I'm going through part of my database right now of older leads that I just couldn't get through at time, or talk to them and then let them fall off, because right now, if you haven't noticed, there's a little bit of extra time in our real estate worlds. So I'm going through and I'm clearing some stuff up, and I'm shocked at how many people I got in my database or came into a lead 2 years ago that still haven't bought in their first house, or still haven't bought that first investment property. Because those are the two things we like to work with the most, our first-time buyers and first-time investors. I like to introduce it. I like the education portion of it. I think a lot of people get overwhelmed when they start thinking about either or. They get information from everywhere, here, there, online, a whole bunch of webinars that people do. You know what I mean? Like, people are getting information from everywhere. So it's about being comfortable with what you're doing and understanding that process, right? And having somebody that's going to be able to guide you through it to make sure you have that confidence.
Well, speaking about the first-time buyers, Alessandra, credit. I know you're doing a seminar. This is a bit of a time for a plug about credit coming up, but about credit. Someone comes to you today and says, I'm looking to buy a house. You're going to obviously want to know what their credit's at. How should they be looking at their credit? And instead of saying, listen, I'm looking to buy a house in 3 months, how soon should they come to you, just in case there's something that needs to be looked at? Go ahead.
Yeah, I love talking about credit because it is a very misunderstood part of everybody's lives. I find that most clients that come in thinking they know what their credit score is or how it is calculated. No, they don't. So the minute, like I said earlier, the minute you start thinking about whether to buy a house is the best time to check. So everybody is allowed to order their own credit report once a year through Equifax. And I highly recommend it because not only does it give you an idea of what's reporting on there, but it also helps protect you against fraud, which is a big one. So what happens is if somebody else has gotten a hold of your identity, so all they need is your SIN number and your date of birth and any of your past addresses or even your current one. So what happens is if they apply for a credit card under your name, they can rack it up, not make payments on it. And that's going to seriously bring your score down. And it takes a long time to sort those things out. Even in a less severe example, I had a client who was a twin. And between her and her sister, there were not very many different letters in their first names. So what happened was the credit company got it mixed up. And her sister's card was reporting on her card. And they were not the same level of financial responsibility. They were not. And it took 3 months just to get that off of her report. It took 3 months to get it under control, to get the credit company to look into it and confirm that there was a mistake, and then to finally take that off of her report. And this was happening in the springtime, and I'm sure Kevin can attest, that is a big time in real estate. You do not want to be missing out if you're thinking of buying for the summer. So had that taken longer, she would have ripped her hair out. But in terms of where your credit's at, so that's going to depend on a lot of things. So there's a bunch of different factors, and credit scores are based out of 900s, and 900 being a perfect score. So depending on where you're at on that scale, like if you're in the 500s, we have a lot of work to do. We have to find out why it's at 500. What do we need to do? Are there old collections that you've forgotten about that were never paid? Do you not get those notices anymore because you've moved from one place to another now? Are there accounts that you don't realize are going over the limit every month because you forget about some of these automatic bill payments as you're using your card, right? Are you making late payments? Because late payments are a big one. Most notoriously, believe it or not, are student loans. So when people go from being a student account,
Oh, I might have just lost her.
having a regular bank account. So what happens is student loans don't always update it in time for the next payment. So you think, oh, my next payment's coming from the new account, but it did not. So then it looks like a missed payment. And then you have to go back and explain. Most lenders are very forgiving for that one specifically because it happens so often. But if it's a credit card or a line of credit and there's a bunch of missed payments, that's another story. That one is not so forgiving because you know you've used it and you need to make that payment.
So late payments is a big one.
Yeah. Especially for cell phone bills. I'm guilty of that. I've forgotten to pay my cell phone bill right on its due date. I forget about it sometimes. It's a small bill, so it's not always top of mind like some of my other ones.
Oh, yeah, Neil, go ahead. You had your hand up.
Yeah. So, is it Alessandra?
Yeah.
You mentioned one situation where the credit agency took quite a long time to resolve an issue. So, let's assume that the mistake is really the credit agency mistake, because like you say, there's a mix up in the name, right?
Mhm.
How do you get a credit rating? And there's two main ones in Canada, right? There's Equifax, and was it Transnational?
TransUnion.
TransUnion, sorry. Okay, so how do you motivate them to solve such an issue fast? Because every single person I've talked to who's had credit issues, friends, whatever, they've all given me the same story. They just had to go. It's like a whole epic story they had to create to fix this. I don't understand why. What is it with credit rating agencies that we can do to them that will move things faster? I know
So
this
I'm
might be a funny question, and maybe if it's off topic, you can tell me.
So I'm not sure you're going to like my answer, but they are notoriously slow, unfortunately. So the only way you can really get that resolved is by staying on top of it. So for example, the client that I had who had her sister's mix up, she was calling them once a week, basically.
Wow.
And that's unfortunate, because obviously you as a person have many better things to do than to keep on top of someone else doing their job. But the other side of it is too, we don't know what's happening in the background. Sometimes we get people who work at companies who are just not very good at communicating. So it could just be, oh, well, I haven't received the data from that credit company. I haven't received the data from this other party. Right. So when someone's not good at communicating, processes like this take a lot longer because we just don't know what they're up to. So it could be, oh, well, we got the data, but now we have to reconcile because this has been going on for 2 years on your reports. And now we have to compare 2 years worth of data to make sure we didn't mix it up and that it was actually this credit card company reporting this problem that made the mistake. Right. So unfortunately, it may not be a very quick process at all.
But it seems to me that they're a critical piece of the puzzle for someone getting getting a loan or something, or a mortgage. There's no legislation against them to move fast with these types of things. Like there's no regulation to say, hey, you guys you must, just like the mortgage lending business has certain regulations. Why can't the agencies have such a legal requirement?
So that I wouldn't be sure about. I am not very well versed on consumer protection, and I'm not sure where exactly the credit reporting agencies fall under their regulation. I don't know who the regulating body is for that, but that would be something that might be worth looking into. So I don't unfortunately have the answer to that.
No worries. It's okay. Thanks. I appreciate it.
All right, Neil. Cassandra.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, with credit rating, how does that help you? Does it change your interest? Like, what is that good for when it comes to mortgages?
So there's a few answers. So what happens is the credit can most of the time get you the best interest rate, but it is still one piece of the qualifying realm. So what happens is you can still have a good credit score, but maybe you're self-employed and you write your income off to very, very low amounts. That will still impact your credit, or that will still impact what you qualify for as an interest rate. Big ticket items on a credit report that will really impact your credit or what you can qualify for are things like consumer proposals, bankruptcies, credit counseling, anything big. Those are kind of the big three for what we see. Those three will automatically bring you right down. So if you have any of those big three, you're not going to get best rates until we can show that you've been discharged and you've rebuilt your credit. And there are times where you can have a good score, but you still may have some trouble. So for example, if you get a credit card and you've never had one before, you've had it for a few months, but you haven't really used it. So that's going to bring your score up, but it's more artificial because it doesn't give us enough time to see what your financial responsibility is like on that card. And sometimes we have people who don't even have a credit card. They just have their cell phone bill reporting. That doesn't tell us much either, because the temptation's not there like a credit card or a line of credit, right? Like if you have a $10,000 line of credit that you have for emergencies and you've never had to use it, that is really going to boost your score. That is something that will really bring it up, because the lending system, the way it calculates the score, it says, wow, look at Cass. She's got a $10,000 line of credit, never used it, or only very few times have used it. She's never missed a payment. She's never over the limit. We're going to reward her and boost her score up. Whereas if you have that $10,000 line of credit and it's about halfway, the system's going to start to go, well, something's going on here because this balance has been carrying for a while. So what's going on? We're going to bring it down a little bit.
So that actually answers a good question for me. I keep getting offered a line of credit, so it's good for me to take it if I don't need it, to use it, or not.
So,
like just leave it there.
You can have it and just leave it there. The only thing is you just have to be careful with what institution it's with, because some banks and credit unions or trust companies, whoever it is you bank with, some of them may cancel your line of credit if you never use it. So you just want to be aware. So if it's something that if you never use it and then they cancel it on you, they're going to close it and then it's no longer on your report. So it may just be something that once a year you pull, say, $100 from it and then pay it back as soon as you get the statement. And then you don't have to use it again for another year. However much time they say, oh, you haven't used it in this amount of time. If you don't use it soon, we're going to close it. But anytime you have an open credit line, and you don't use it, it just sits there. So there is a small portion of your score that is based on how long you have had a particular piece of credit. So if you've had it for a long time and you haven't used it, the system says, oh, this is wonderful. Bring up that score.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and Cassandra too, I think Ivan even said this earlier, when you're offered credit, take it, because when you need it, they won't give it. Do you know what I mean? Like that's how it goes. When like the banks, when they see you don't need it, they're like, oh, here you go, we'll let you spend more. But then if they see that you're in a little bit of trouble and then you need it to get you through a couple of months, you go, oh, sorry, we're not giving it to you now, right? Where if you have it there waiting, you can get through those couple of months and then pay it all down. The only other thing is if you have a credit card or inactivity on a credit card, I think is also not good. They want you to see you using it and paying you down and see that activity there, that you are responsible with that, versus having a credit card just sit there, because then it doesn't do anything. If you go to Visa and just put it there but continue using your debit because you don't want to go into credit, it won't look as good. I'm pretty sure that's right. If I'm wrong.
I use my credit card like a debit card and pay it all off. That's why I have a very good credit score.
Yeah.
And but I have a very low income, so I'm just not sure how my credit score like help. Like I have an 829. What does that do for me if I have a low income?
So in terms of income levels, that really comes down to, you know, what that translates to as a purchase price. Because again, it's a formula and it's down payment, purchase price, interest rate, and amortization. So it's one of four pieces. So it's one of those things where we kind of have to take a step back and we have to say, okay, once we put everything together, what does that look like?
Okay. Thanks.
So I do have a question, pre-qualification. So Kevin, when you're going to see somebody, when do you ask about their qualification? Or is it something? Sorry?
Right away. There's no point in looking at houses if you don't know what you can afford.
Right.
If you're going to look at X and you can only afford Y, we've just wasted both of our times. Right? For us, the way, again, whether you're buying a house for yourself to live in or whether you're buying an investment, step one is financing. You need to know what you can afford by knowing what you can borrow and by what you already have and what you can leverage. Right. That is step one. Step two is education. Again, on both sides, doesn't matter what you're buying. That's where you're going to start to figure things out. But you have to know the money first to be able to even figure out if you're buying yourself, what neighborhood you're going to be able to live in, what size of home, or what you're going to be able to, whatever, that kind of dictates that. On the investment side, it says, oh, what type of investment am I going to be able to buy? Do I have any money left over for renovations? I guess that is also both sides. But you know what I mean? You have to know the money first. And earlier, you mentioned about tools that mortgages have to make buying better. There's lots of rebates and stuff like that online. We have a website dedicated to first-time home buyers. It's timetobuyMyFirstHome.ca. So you can check that out. And there are different benefits that the government gives away. There's RSPs. So if you have RSP money, it's a great way to use it that way. But the one that we use the most with both investors and first-time home buyers is called Purchase Plus Improvements. And what that allows you to do is to buy something. Let's say you're approved for $600,000. You buy something for $540,000. They will give you 10% of the purchase price to roll into improvements as long as you stay under your approved amount. So at 540,000, 10% of that is 54,000, which keeps you under your $600,000 that you were approved for. So you can now take that money and redo your bathroom, your floors, update the kitchen, whatever you need to do, as long as you're not taking it and buying a Porsche or something like that. Like, it has to be used for the house. They want to see receipts to give it out, or they want you to be using a contractor. They're very strict on giving that money out, but it's great there for you to be able to use it. Because I can't tell you how many times people turn away from a house because it has carpet. Like, that's a $3,000 fix that's going to make your house that much better and more enjoyable for you to live in afterwards, right? Like, don't get turned away by that. Or the fact that there's a dent in a wall, we can paint that, we can mud that. Like, there's so many easy fixes to do for a little bit of money to make your home that much more enjoyable or livable. You know, like, people walk into things, well, I would never live in this. Well, no, not now. You know, there was a cat peeing on the floor over there, but we can fix all that. You know, like, it's you have to have that vision for a future of, if you're going to be creative with a program like that. And with the market being the way it is, it allows people to get in at a better price if they can just use their forward thinking to see what it could be like. Like, what was the show? Property Brothers. Do you remember, you guys ever watch that on HGTV? Yep. That's the exact same concept. Oh, you want all of this? Well, that's 1.2 million. But if you buy this piece of crap for 700,000, I shouldn't say it like that. You know what I mean? If you buy this for 700,000 and we spend $100,000, we can now make it worth 1.1 or whatever that scenario is, right? To make sure that it's more enjoyable and you're getting exactly what you want. You know, anyways, that is a great program to use, Purchase Plus Improvements. The other thing I'll point out, just because it's over Ivan's shoulder, is that QR code. That is something that we now have the ability to allow people to search properties easier than realtor.ca, and it also shows you sold information as well. So if you take a picture of that QR code, it'll allow you. I know you have to sign up for it, but it's monitored through our program, so it's not like you're giving your information out to somebody else. I'm not going to sell it to anybody, but it does ask, because of our board information, to give you the sold information that we know who you are. That's really what that's all about. But I have so many friends and clients that tell me they search realtor.ca while laying in their beds or wherever they are, on the GO train, on the toilet. Well, it's one of their favorite apps. So this allows them to do it that much better, that much easier. And you can make lists. You can circle wherever you are. You can pull up properties that are right around for you, again, sold or available. So it's a pretty cool tool that we are just starting to let everybody know about in the last week. So there it is. If you guys want to check it out and give me feedback, I'd love it too.
I just want to add really quickly to Purchase Plus Improvements, because it is genuinely a great program. I find one of the biggest hurdles with it, though, is that renovations generally need to be done within, I think it's 90 days for most lenders. So sometimes the hard part is finding a contractor that you can get between closing and when that 90 days hits. That's usually the biggest hurdle with it. But apart from that, if you've got someone on board, like sometimes there's a contractor in the family and they can kind of work within those, but depending on the contractor and their timeline, that's usually the main hiccup with it. And apart from that, as long as you get your quotes up front, it is something that we do. Like, Purchase Plus is something that you have to let your mortgage person know right away, because it has to be requested up front. Right. Because if you ask for it later, it becomes a lot more work, because like I said, you need those quotes up front, because that's how we can tell if you're going to be within that percentage range that the lender will increase it by.
And then, with the contractor, that is a good point. We do need to have all that lined up, but that's just organization and planning, right? We know what we're going to do. We have that contractor coming through the home before you purchase it, or as one of your revisits, so they can start figuring out what they need to order and taking measurements, so that when you close in 60 days, they're ready to start your job in 60 days, and then product comes in. But there's an organization to it for sure, especially if you're moving into the home, right? How are you going to move in? Are we moving in when it's fully done or when it's livable? We have to make sure all of that is lined up. But again, it all can be done, and it's very beneficial to the home's appreciation, right? Like if you think about why flippers flip homes, they do it for that exact same reason, right? That forced appreciation from doing a renovation. We basically look at every dollar spent should give us somewhere between $1.75 and $2 back when we're looking at all that. So same thing is going to be, but now you get to keep it instead of selling it.
So Shannon Green, of course, with Green Lending, she's another member here, and but she was just saying that some people are not getting home inspections done on a purchase, and then of course they have unexpected costs, right? So is it necessary? Obviously, I mean, that's a rhetorical question. We know the answer to that. Can either one of you speak to the home inspection?
Sure. You want to go to? Or?
Go ahead.
So home inspections are very important. What they do tell you though is structural, mechanical, and electrical. It is a visual inspection. We cannot move anything. So if there's a crack in the basement wall and they have all of their bins packed up against that wall, I can't remove those bins to look to see if there's a crack. Now, if it's easily moved out and put back in, we're checking. We go into attics, we do everything. That is a part of it, but it is structural, mechanical, and electrical. That's what you're looking at, what's going on. And then it's really important to have a good inspector. They don't need a license to be an inspector. Frank, your next door neighbor, could be a home inspector. Before I was in real estate, I bought a pre-construction home that we moved into first. And you get a 30-day inspection, and then you get a 90-day, and then a 1 year. Well, before the 1 year was up, I didn't know that much about houses or real estate or what we should do. So I thought it was going to be a great idea to bring this home inspector in and go through my house. Well, I know a lot more now after 10 years in real estate than when I did 13 years ago when we did all this. But he did nothing. He charged me $400 to tell me that they had to add more insulation to the roof, which is something every inspector is going to tell you. It's on every single report because insulation decreases over time. So when the builders put it in, they're not putting the right amount, or they're putting just to the bare minimum, right? Because it's cost to them and speed. So anyways, you have to go back. But and the other thing that they'll always tell you is grading, sloping grading away from the house. I think I've seen that in every single home inspection report I've ever done, is that you want to help your grading by dripping it away from the house, right? With any gardens or anything like that. But no, yeah, get them done for sure. For a few $100s, when you're spending multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars or north of $1 million, this is a very wise investment. Even when you were doing multiple offers and people were telling me that, oh, I went in with no inspection. I was like, yeah, why? Well, we had to. Our realtor said we had to. I was like, oh, we do our inspections 2 days before the offer date. That way we know exactly what we're doing, and we can be confident when we're offering $200,000 more than what they're asking for. Oh, you could do that?
Yeah, lenders, some lenders, Alessandra, require it, right?
So I'm going to preface this. So the inspection and the appraisal are two different things, and most people consider them to be the same thing, which they are not. So the home inspection is what protects you, because if you get that home inspection and there's a lot of deficiencies in that report, then somebody may say, okay, I know I wanted a fixer-upper, but this one's way over my head. As a first-time buyer, I don't know if I can take on all these issues. Whereas an investor might come in and say, I got a guy for this, and this, not a problem, right? The appraisal is something that the lender brings in to make sure that the property meets its basic lending guidelines. So they confirm things like the square footage, because there are minimum square footage requirements. Is the house in a marketable condition? That's not something the inspector is going to look at. Like Kevin said, the inspector is looking at the bones and everything of the house. So like Kevin said, if there's a big crack in that foundation and that's going to cause a big problem, the inspector will be able to tell. Like if it's rained lately, they're going to say, ooh, look at the water that's coming in from that crack, right? Whereas the appraisal looks at the value of the home and they say, okay, based on what the neighborhood of similar houses have sold for, we can support the purchase price. That is the main difference between the two. So a lot of people tend to think that they're the same thing, but they're not. And even to comment, like even back when the market was going crazy, we actually had a lot of clients that were offering, when they sold their house, they had a pre-inspection done. So they called in an inspector, and anybody that was looking to buy the house, they gave them a copy of the report.
Awesome.
Yes, which is a great seller's tool. But as a buying agent, as a selling agent, yes, we want to know what problems are there so that we can address them before someone does their home inspection, right? So then if it is on the report, we can then go get the inspector to come back and say, oh, look, they saw this, we corrected it. The buyer should still be doing their own inspection because that inspector was hired by the seller for the seller's purposes. You want to have an inspector hired by you for your purposes. Same thing again with an agent. I talked to a lady on the phone yesterday who told me she doesn't want to work with an agent. She only wants to work with the ones that are selling the house. And this is a misconception with the general public a lot because they think they're going to save money off that agent's commission if they buy and let him buy and sell. And I would say this, two things. If that agent's willing to negotiate some of his commission, how he feeds his family away, he's going to be very easily willing to negotiate some of his clients' money away. So we'll negotiate more off that price than you're going to save without working for me. The other thing is knowing that we are working in your best interest, right? When you're working with the seller's agent, okay, we have representation where that seller is now my client. I have to do everything in their best interest. I have to do whatever they ask me to as long as it's lawful. So if I have a client come in off the street for an open house or an online lead or whatever, and they say, hey, Kevin, I want to buy 123 Main Street. Great. I'm representing the seller at 123 Main Street. I can help you with this transaction, but you're not going to be a client of mine, but I can represent you as a customer. So what the customer does now, and they have to sign a whole form saying that they understand this. It says that I can help them with the transaction, but Remax and myself are representing the seller and owe them no obligations, no fiduciary duties, no nothing. All I have to do is tell you the truth and use factual information because that's what I'm bound by anyways. So now let's say you came into the open house, the house is listed for $1 million. And you say, I want to buy it. How do I know it's worth $1 million? And I say, well, I have comparables, right? Now, I know that there's 10 houses sold recently in this neighborhood. They're all comparables, but 5 are for more than $1 million, and 5 of them are for closer to 900,000. Now, it's very truthful of me and factual information if I only show them these 5 that sold for over $1 million because I'm working in the best interest of my seller. So now this customer is being told the truth. He's being provided factual information, but he doesn't know about this because he's not being represented or what is in his best interest. Does that make sense?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Because this lady, anyways, I'm going to call her back again because I don't understand, like, if I didn't get through or whatever, but, or she should work with somebody, even if it's not me, you should have somebody representing you, right? Like, I get it. Everybody knows at least 3 realtors. And they say some of us are really good and the most are okay. And some of us do it part-time. And that's one thing I think is very important. There was just a statistic released the other day from the Toronto Real Estate Board. I don't know all the numbers specifically off the top of my head, but it was something ridiculous. Of our 60,000 members, 40,000 of them did less than 3 deals last year. Less than 3 transactions. Wow. More than 2/3 of that board. And then the majority of them, again, did less than 20 transactions. Right. There's a small few of us that did north of 20 transactions. And that is experience, that is understanding who's going to work in your best interest for what you're needing to get done. Anyways, I just think it's
a good segue because we're wrapping it up. I'm going to actually start with Alessandra again, make your closing pitch, but also let everybody know that Green Lending, that's Shannon Green and Alessandra and Kevin are all on This Great City. Go ahead and check out the site. Look them up because their information is there. And it links through to their websites so you can get more information. Go ahead, Alessandra.
Yeah, so I guess the main takeaway is from everything that we've talked about is to understand that your right time is different than someone else's because there's no one size fits all solution for real estate. There isn't. There's a lot of great products. There's a lot of properties out there, but it's what makes sense for you. Even when it comes to mortgages. You can be another self-employed person, but your financials are different than someone else's financials. So there's no one size fits all. And the other main takeaway is, like Kevin said, you want to be protected. You want a team that is going to protect you. So whether it's making sure you're financially okay to buy this home, or, am I going to be overpaying? That's where the expertise comes in. And that's the kind of thing where just make sure you protect yourself, even with the home inspection, appraisal. Like you've got a lot of good contacts, even just within this group, that can help guide you along that way.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I'll tell you one other thing that both of you are really amazing at is anyone who has a question, you just want to ask a question before you step into that, you're looking to buy a place or sell your place. Just phone them. Right? They're very approachable. They'll answer your questions. They might even go and meet you for coffee. But the point is, make the call, get the information. Knowledge is power, right? So that way, and then it's amazing when I talk to Kevin or I talk to Alessandra, and they spend the time and explain it to me. Sometimes I need it to be explained like I'm a 2-year-old, and they do, and I really appreciate it. So please get their phone numbers, reach out. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I'll say thanks for having me. It was awesome to be able to chat with everybody today. But this is what it's about. It's about having protection, a team, so you can do whatever it is you want to do. And as Alessandra said, we're all as individuals, our fingerprints, right? So some want this, some want that, and we have to figure out what makes the most amount of sense for you, and getting your ducks in a row so that when the time does come, you're able to pull the trigger. That's really what it's about. So when you start thinking about it, right, that's when you should start reaching out to either one of us to make sure that you get what you're going to need to figure out how you move forward properly, because you don't want to miss out on that right opportunity because you weren't pre-approved, so you couldn't put down a firm offer even though you knew in your mind's eye you could afford it and you were comfortable, but you just weren't 100%, and then you missed out. It's never fun looking back saying, oh, I wish I did that then. So yeah, always here to help. And Cressy.ca is our website.
That's right. You don't want to drive by and watch another family in the house that you could have gotten. All right. Sheila, how was it? Did you get the information you're looking for?
Yes, thank you so much. It's been very enlightening, and honestly, I'm looking forward to poking around, and hopefully you guys are okay if I can ask a couple of questions later. So.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Cassandra, for the questions. It was good. And I'll see you folks at the About Credit, which is happening. Go ahead, Alessandra. What is it?
Yeah, so about credit, again, I love talking about credit, and it's a very misunderstood part of everyone's lives, whether you're looking to open up your mortgage or not. So it's very important to understand how it can impact, even if your mortgage is just coming up for renewal. It is still your credit will still have an impact on that. So I will be talking about the 101s. I will be talking about how to understand a report, how it is calculated, how different things will impact that. And then I also have my colleague, Philip Nunez from Merrick's Financial, who is one of my lenders, and he will be answering any questions you have for the lending side and giving us that perspective as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you again. All right. Take care.
Bye.